yourself a gin distillery if that's the sort of way you're going down there. But please remember to turn your phones off, okay? It's really important. So we are going to have a bit of an educational discussion now. We're going over to Indonesia, and our guide is a mild-mannered man from the Isle of Wight who now calls Brisbane home, Harry Fisher. He's a project manager for Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, and he fits the bill too. I've been listening to him on YouTube the last couple of days while we've been coming over here, so I'm now hooked on anything that Harry has to say. So I've listened to discussions he's had around Indonesia, and he's focusing in particular today. Kevin Wallace, that's right. He's focusing on nickel out of Indonesia because their share of the market has gone from 5% to 50%. So what does that mean? What's the game changer? How are they producing nickel over there? Is ESG going to be a slight issue for them? I'm sure Harry knows more. Let's make him welcome, everyone, please.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's refreshed after the break. So yeah, a bit of a change of pace. It will be a little bit educational, but hopefully that's useful. And then we'll dig into it a little bit more in the panel discussion with Joe later on. As Chrissy said in the introduction, I'll talk a little bit about Indonesia. I'll try not to focus on it too much, just so it is a little bit relevant to kind of what you're looking at too. But it is really important to think about it as kind of really changing the game in the nickel and cobalt markets. I was there a couple of months ago, go around some sites, and there's a lot changing, and there's a lot that's going to be changing in the next kind of 10 years or so. So just a quick introduction to Benchmark. We are a mineral intelligence organization focusing on the lithium-ion battery supply chain. So kind of anything within batteries, energy transition, we're focusing on across price assessments, forecasting, consultancy, sustainability services. It's all up there. Any questions, please feel free to come and have a chat with me and Cam outside. So I'll just start off on the demand side. Where are we looking for, particularly nickel and cobalt demand and batteries more broadly, the importance of chemistry, particularly to those raw materials. What's changed for nickel in the last couple of years? How has the industry structure changed? Why is that important going forwards? Why Indonesia is important? And then just touching on some risks and opportunities towards the end. So I always like showing this because it sets the scene nicely if you're not so familiar with where we're looking for the battery market. And this is what we focus on at Benchmark, so we talk about this a lot. This is the demand profile for cathode demand going into batteries since 2018. You can see EVs is driving most of the story. A lot of growth over that short period, really kicked off during COVID, and we've seen a lot of EV sales recently, and you see more and more on the road now. In fact, I got in a Tesla to the airport this morning. So that's what Uber's using now too. But when you look at it out to 2040, it's very small. You fast forward and it looks like it's barely begun. And that's what's really driving the demand for these raw materials: cobalt, nickel, lithium, manganese, and we all know the familiar ones. But that's the story, and you can see a very, very strong demand profile for these raw materials. And that EV demand is being driven by the major markets, by the major automotive markets, previously China, but increasingly Europe and North America. That red bar is the EU and North America combined. And you can see, I haven't given the numbers here, but you can see the amount of growth from those two regions. And the important thing to note in terms of chemistry is that the nickel and cobalt containing chemistries are more important in those markets compared to, say, China, where LFP is really dominating the market at the moment. But for nickel and cobalt, Europe and North America will be key drivers. And then when we flick to the demand for the individual chemistries, there's a lot of talk in the market about LFP and how much that's growing. And as I said, that's mostly a China story at the moment, but that's not so positive for nickel and cobalt, whereas the NCM chemistries in the yellow, you can see they still take a decent chunk of the market going forwards, at least 50%. And there will be space for both those chemistries. It's not one or the other. LFP suits the kind of more mass market vehicles, but NCM is typically higher energy density and a longer vehicle range. So now I've set the scene, you can see that the demand profile is still very strong for nickel and cobalt, but what's changed for nickel? How has the structure of the industry changed, and how does that make a difference to the outlook? Well, just starting on the left, the nickel market has always been made up of primarily stainless steel demand, and that's still very much the case. We've still got 2/3 of the market from stainless steel demand alone. But you can see the rise of battery demand in the blue line. It's going to take a while before it intersects, but you can see that we're really on that steep part of the curve now, and the battery market makes up a much more important part of overall industry dynamics. And on the right, those are the raw materials and the feedstocks that are going into nickel sulfate, and that's the chemical that you need to go into batteries. And you can see some shifts there in China, the major refining market. We've seen a drop in class 1 in the gray, so that's nickel metal deliverable on the LME, and a rise of MHP, so that's mixed hydroxide precipitate. That's really important for Indonesia, and also MAT as well, which is another one of the new supply routes. So those two I'll keep touching on those, but effectively the takeaway of this slide is the battery market's becoming more important to nickel. It's not quite as dominant as, say, lithium and cobalt, but it's still important. And we've seen a shift in the way in which intermediate products are used by the battery supply chain. And now this is complicated. It's somewhat deliberately so, because the nickel market is complicated. There's lots of lines. Some of these lines didn't exist 2 years ago, but there's new routes on here. I won't go into everything, but the number 1 and the number 2 are probably the two to point out, really. So you can see this route here, so from laterite to MHP to sulfate and then into batteries. That's really becoming the dominant route for the battery supply chain. MHP is now the feedstock of choice for nickel sulfate, and that's where most of the growth is from Indonesia. And then sulfate through to batteries. There's various ways in which you can get to sulfate, but really that's the dominant route. And then the interesting thing, number 2 here, the nickel market used to be quite split between the class 2 market and the class 1 market. They used to be quite separate. And this has changed in the last couple of years. There's that now companies, can go from MPI in class 2 to MAT, and then through to sulfate and through to batteries. So we're really starting to see a merge of the two markets. The whole overall industry structure has changed. It's becoming more dynamic, and it means that companies can switch between different parts of the supply chain based on short-term imbalances. So Indonesia, why is it so important? I've talked about MHP production for batteries. I've talked about MAT production as well, and that's where all of the growth is. In the past, there's been a lot of development of nickel sulfide projects here in Australia, in Canada, in other parts of the world, but that pipeline has really started to dry up, particularly relative to laterite, where we're seeing huge amounts of growth. And you can see now about 3/4 of the market is from laterite alone. And you can see that shifted quite considerably, even over that period. Most of that is due to Indonesia. So it was about as Chrissy said, it was about 5% of the market back in 2015, and now it's about half of total nickel supply globally. So it's really changed to become a dominant producer of nickel, and that's why it's key to the overall outlook for nickel as a whole. And looking at those individual supply routes, I talked about MAT and MHP. You can see they're relatively small shares up to 2020, when Indonesia decided to ban nickel ore exports. It was all ferronickel and MPI for the stainless steel sector. And then when the government decided to ban nickel ore, the companies were forced to look to add value, go a bit further downstream. And that's when we've started to see this rise. It's still very small relative to ferronickel and MPI, but you can see that these MHP projects are starting to emerge, and now they're even starting to convert to nickel sulfate for batteries as well. So this is where all the growth will be in the years to come. This will start to tail off. It's all for MHP and MAT into batteries. And the Western OEMs are getting involved in Indonesia as well. You can see some of the names up there. That's to reduce the price exposure. It's to make sure that they've got access to enough volumes. And given they're such a large player, they can't ignore one country if they need the nickel for the batteries they're going to be producing. And we're also seeing OEMs getting involved in WA projects as well in the relatively early stages. So that the OEMs are realizing that there's a need for new nickel units. There's plenty of nickel going around at the moment, but as we get towards the back end of the decade, we're going to need new developments. And just looking for nickel and cobalt in terms of our outlook, you can see that the share of production just keeps growing. That's where all the growth is at the moment for nickel in particular. We're seeing smaller volumes from here in Australia, from China, Japan, but you can see all the bulk of supply growth is from Indonesia. And that means that this laterite share is just continuing to grow at the expense of the more traditional sulfide route. And I haven't talked about cobalt too much yet, but you get cobalt along in the MHP as well. So the growth in Indonesia is also pulling the share up for cobalt, and that's at the expense of the DRC, which has traditionally been the dominant market for cobalt, about kind of 70% at the moment. But the rise of Indonesia is taking some of that share away. So we're starting to see these two major markets really revolving around Indonesia and China, and also the DRC for cobalt. So that's not great from a diversification perspective, of course, but it seems to be where the market's trending at the moment. And just one final slide on the outlook. I think I've said it now, but you can see the huge amount of potential from Indonesia for both nickel and cobalt supply growth, and that's why we're seeing it as changing the game. So, but what does this mean for risks and opportunities for the market? The number of projects being developed in Indonesia just keeps going up. Back in early 2021, we had 25 projects for nickel, and now we're tracking more than 80. So in the space of a couple of years, it's increased a huge amount. Most of those are for MHP and some MAT. And that's really just to supply the huge amounts of battery demand that's coming. But with that, of course, becomes project development and risks. So some of those charts that I just showed may be slightly lower than that because they might not reach the market or they might not be cost competitive. But you can see that there's a huge amount of potential here, and we're not seeing that level of development anywhere else in the world. So there's opportunities, but if you're not producing the right product and you're not cost competitive, then it's going to be difficult to compete. And I talked about the OEMs. It's all very well there being a lot of development in the market, but ultimately the downstream has to accept it. We've seen some of the major OEMs invest in Indonesia and projects in other parts of the world, but ultimately you need a market for your product. So you need to be producing the right product that's going to serve the battery supply chain, as ultimately that's going to be the biggest demand center going forwards. I'll touch on ESG in a second. Just the final point to touch on here for policy. We heard from Joe earlier on about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Critical Raw Materials Act in Europe. Indonesia is not currently compliant within the IRA, so that something has to change there if the IRA targets are going to be hit. But that's another level of complication to these markets, potential bifurcation between kind of policy compliant units and non-policy compliant, depending on where it's produced. And the same for ESG. We're certainly seeing more potential for markets to bifurcate along these thematics. And just showcasing a couple of slides here from what our sustainability team produced. So we're doing more and more coverage at Benchmark on the sustainability aspects within the markets we look at, because it's getting more and more traction. We're all familiar with carbon, but also terrestrial acidification from SO2. But you can see the picture's quite different. For carbon, the H-power route to MHP is fairly similar to the kind of conventional sulfide smelting route, but you can see that the conventional route is a lot more energy intensive. So when renewables start to gain a bit of traction, the conventional route has got more to gain. So potentially that improves the competitiveness against some of these Indonesian projects, because if they can reduce their kind of carbon emitting energy use, then that will pull down their carbon emissions. So that's positive for competitiveness of kind of non-Indonesian projects. But then if you look at acidification, it's quite different, because the HPAL process, both in MHP and through to sulfate, uses a lot of sulfuric acid, and that has other impacts on the environment beyond carbon. So we track a number of these different criteria for our sustainability coverage for each of the markets we look at. It's an important consideration to think about which route you're going to, what product you're ultimately getting to, and what market that's going to. But companies and investors are increasingly looking at these kind of details as well. And this is just kind of a representative cost carbon curve by route. The HPAL is Indonesian in the yellow, and then you've got the sulfides in the green. And then the traditional stainless steel route, you can see how carbon emitting it is. And that's really where the issue is for a lot of the Indonesian production. The traditional producers in Indonesia, particularly those that are kind of going to convert from MPI through to matte for batteries, is going to be that high energy intensity and carbon emissions that they need to tackle for those units to be accepted by the market. So just to wrap up, I think it's clear that the demand profile for these minerals is very strong. I don't think many people would contend with that. I've talked about Indonesia, the importance of Indonesia. It's not just important to nickel and cobalt to make sure we've got enough units for the energy transition, but it's key for the development of both markets, particularly as the share of the overall market grows. But there are risks, and that means that there could be potential bifurcation in these markets, either along policy lines or along ESG lines. But that does open up opportunities for other markets, particularly FTA countries, if you're looking at it through the lenses of the IRA. And those policy announcements will certainly reshape the way in which we're seeing the supply chains today. Thank you very much.
I love that. I didn't have to ring my bell. I just had to stand out once. But it was an interesting conversation. It's always good to know a little bit more about these commodities or chemicals, if Mr. Lithium's in the room, that we need to know about. Now, I like to go stalking our presenters and learn a little bit more about them before they come up here, not just their projects, but them individually. So I spent the last couple of hours looking to connect with our next presenter and have a chat with him. And I've been walking around with a photograph of him on my computer. That's why I said computer. You can come and look at it later. But this fellow is definitely not at this conference. And then I saw this fellow over here with this name bag, and it said Samuel Ekins, a director at Wildcat Resources Limited. And I thought, well, you don't really look like your picture. But then I thought, I look a lot shorter in real life than I do from my pictures as well. And he said, no, actually, that's a picture of my very fantastic, exceptionally handsome brother-in-law from Chile. And somehow or another, his picture is cropping up everywhere I am. It's like AI has made it. Is that my phone? Can you hear that? Oh, good grief. Excuse me, Claire, but I'm in the middle of a very busy conference over in Melbourne and I have to put you under hold. Goodbye. Okay. So that's a reminder of putting things under hold. But I was looking at this picture and obviously we found out it was the brother. So I didn't get to connect, but the brother-in-law, I didn't get connect. But what I was interested in was the term, and Wildcat is the name of the company that we're going to talk about. And Wildcat, when you look at it as a term in the Webster Dictionary, says, and I quote, a commercial venture which has high profitability of great profits or total losses. Those who enter a Wildcat business venture risk either losing everything they put into it, striking it rich and making a lot of money. And I thought, oh, well, where does Wildcat, the resources company, sit? I looked through the news reports in the company from January, and it was pretty obvious very quickly exactly where they sit. At one point a few weeks ago, they were actually up 1,200% since January. Would you please make Sam welcome, and let's see what we think of the Wildcat.
Thank you very much. That's a great introduction. So I'm from Wildcat Resources. We're a Western Australian-based exploration company. There we go. Yeah, we've got three major assets at the moment. We've got the Mount Adra Gold Project in New South Wales. We have the Bolt Cutter lithium and gold project in the Pilbara, not far from Port Hedland. And in May this year, we announced the Tabba Tabba tantalum project. Now, Tabba Tabba is a significant tantalum field. It was previously owned in 2007 by Sons of Gwalia. In 2007, Global Advanced Metals, a major tantalum trading house, acquired 4 significant assets from Sons of Gwalia, and they were Greenbushes, Pilgangoora, Wodgina and Tabba Tabba. Now, the first 3 are now major lithium deposits and account for around 35% of global lithium supply. And Tabba Tabba is the only one of those 4 major assets owned by Sons of Gwalia that's never been systematically explored for lithium or explored really for lithium at all. And so we're very fortunate to have acquired this project, and we're rapidly testing it as we speak. So just a quick snapshot of Wildcat. We've got 665 million shares on issue at the moment. We'll have close to 1 billion shares on issue once the deal to acquire Tabba Tabba is completed. That deal will be finalised at the end of this month. The only outstanding thing that's needed is FIRB, Foreign Investment Board approval. We've got about $9 million in the bank at the moment. We get a further, well, $2 million at the moment in cash, and $7 million are in trust, and that comes out when the deal is finalised. So our market cap today was around $250 million diluted. So who is in Wildcat? We've, our chairman is Jeff Elliott. Jeff Elliott is the former managing director and 19-year managing director of CSA Global. CSA Global is probably one of the most well-regarded geological consulting firms worldwide. I'm a geologist. I've got about 17 years experience. I joined the company 2.5 years ago. Matt Banks and Alex Hewlett. Matt and Alex recapitalised a company called Spectrum Rare Earths, which became Spectrum Metals, and made the Penny West North discovery, which was sold to Ramelius Resources a couple of years ago. They also put together Red Dirt Minerals, which became Delta Lithium, and Matt Banks is a founding director of Rumble Resources, who recently discovered the giant Erahidi lead zinc deposit in the Erahidi Basin in Western Australia. Last week, we announced that we'd brought AJ Severamento onto the board. AJ is a very well-regarded mining engineer. He's got a lot of experience in deals and M&A, as well as a former mine manager of the Grasberg mine in Irian Jaya. He brings onto the board the capability and the experience to develop projects. So that's Tabba Tabba. There's a photo there showing the pit where they mined tantalum in 2014. You can see that it's a very large pegmatite body, and yeah. So where is it located? It's where this dot is here. It's only 80 kilometres by road to the port at Port Hedland, and that's via the Great Northern Highway and the Marble Bar Station Road, both quality sealed roads, and then the Wallarina Station Road, which is a dirt road over which we've got a miscellaneous haul road licence. So we've got access all the way to port. It's only 47 kilometres by road to the processing facility at Pilgangoora, and only 87 kilometres by road to the processing facility at Wodgina. So extremely good optionality from a development perspective in terms of its location. All these blue tenements that you can see around the project, and these grey tenements, they are Wildcat's Bolt Cutter project. We've got over 900 square kilometres in applications and 100% owned tenements, and as I'll show you a bit later on, they're highly prospective for lithium mineralisation as well as gold mineralisation. Neighbours to the south, and it doesn't come up very well in this diagram, but we've got De Grey to our south, FMG to our north, and surrounding that is Sayona Mining. So zooming in on Tabba Tabba, in green the mining lease boundary. So it's granted mining leases, which is incredibly important. That means that, you know, in terms of if we have success, the opportunity to move into production, it can be very rapid, and probably 2 years ahead of any other early stage project in Western Australia. to the north is a miscellaneous licence over which we have a bore field. In blue, shown in dark blue, are pegmatite outcrops that were mapped in the 1980s by Pan-Continental. They are all outcropping, and there is, from there to there, it's over 3.2 kilometres of continuous outcropping pegmatites. Some of these are very large, over 60 metres in diameter, and this one here over 300 metres long. The Tabba Tabba resource is located here in the centre, and that was where that photo was taken from in that previous slide. Tabba Tabba hosts a mineral resource of around 660,000 pounds of tantalum at 950 parts per million tantalum. That's about 3 times higher grade than any other tantalum deposit in the world. It's drilled by 140 drill holes, and the maximum depth that those drill holes are drilled is only 35 metres below surface. So this deposit is open towards the north. Now that is the only drilling that's ever been done on this tenement. When it was, other than this, there's a couple of holes that were drilled for a sterilisation program, which I'll discuss in a second. When it was mapped in the 1980s by Pan-Continental, they classified 3 different types of pegmatites. A tantalum type pegmatite, just around here, a couple of lepidolite pegmatites, and the rest of them are classified as simple albite type pegmatites. Now, simple albite type pegmatites is how they describe the pegmatites of Pilgangoora. So that was a tick for us when we were doing our due diligence on acquiring this project. The second tick is that up here, underneath the miscellaneous licence in the north, is a licence that's owned by FMG. And you can see there's lots and lots of drilling on there. FMG have drilled out a lithium resource here in 2018. That pegmatite there was also mapped as simple albite type pegmatite. If you go to the, there's a mining licence application online, and the best intercept in that zone there is 39 metres at 1.38% lithium. So we've got evidence that the simple albite type pegmatites are mineralised with lithium. Then in 2014, 4 drill holes were drilled for a sterilisation program for a tailings storage facility. They were vertical holes, only 40 metres deep, and they returned 16 metres at 0.9% lithium from 10 metres, 1 metre at 2% lithium at the end of the hole at 40 metres, so we don't know how thick that intercept is, and 8 metres at 1.42% lithium from 4 metres. So these are arguably ore-grade lithium intercepts, located here in this pegmatite body, which is over 300 metres long, also classified as simple albite type pegmatite. We have commenced drilling. We've had a drill rig up there for 2 months. We commenced in the north with an RC rig, and that rig then progressed to the south. We brought in a second rig a month ago, and that has continued to follow up the drilling of the first rig. We've progressed down through here, and about a month ago we announced that we completed over around 5,000 metres for 30 drill holes, and we've basically continued for the last month. In October, beginning of October, we're planning on bringing in a third rig, a diamond rig, to commence diamond drilling for metallurgical and mineralogical work. That's just a diagram, a photo on the first week of drilling. There's the drill rig on the second hole. We've got a camp, and this basin area here is where they had the tailings storage facility for that pegmatite body that's over 300 metres long with the ore-grade intercepts. That's another view about 3 weeks into the drilling, looking out to the east from the camp. You can see that the topography is generally very flat with a couple of small hills. That's pretty much what the area looks like, and it's very favourable from a heritage and mining perspective, because the flat topography makes things very easy to access. It means that there are not many heritage areas in there. The whole package has been cleared for heritage. Package and its prospectivity. These big pink bodies you can see everywhere, they're called the split rock super suite, and they are considered in the Pilbara to be the source granites for mineralised LCT pegmatites in the district. These grey lines all through here are large structures, and if you're proximal to large structures and within, say, 10 kilometres of one of these granites, then it's considered to be prospective terrain for forming these types of mineralised pegmatite systems. This package of tenements here has been granted and we're planning drilling on this in the new year. It's completely covered in alluvial cover, and it abuts one of those prospective granites. This package here with the rainbow colour is called Bolt Cutter East. We've had this tenement for a couple of years now, and we've completed over 2,000 soil samples and identified a significant large lithium anomaly over 8 kilometres long. The centre of that anomaly has a zone that's 1.4 kilometres in length. It has soil samples up to 400 parts per million lithium, and it has large beryl crystals scattered away along the entire length. It's an extremely prospective target, and it splays off this major structure called the Pilgangoora Fault, which comes up from Pilgangoora. This tenement here was recently granted and is 100% owned by Wildcat. It's only 10 kilometres to the north of Pilgangoora, along a trend of tantalum workings. There are 3 tantalum workings on the tenement where they've mined alluvial tantalum, and there are outcropping pegmatites. So these 3 targets are priority targets for follow-up in the new year for a broader greenfields exploration campaign. Tabba Tabba is the main priority, and we'll be drilling this extensively over the next foreseeable future with a goal to bring it towards production as quickly as we possibly can, assuming we have success. We're expecting drill assay results. The first batch of assays should be coming out in the next week or 2. Just in terms of Tabba Tabba, from a prospectivity perspective, it's at an intersection between the Tabba Tabba Shear and the Wodgina Australia Fault, which are 2 of the biggest structures in the district. Wodgina Australia Fault is associated with mineralisation at Wodgina, and you could argue that Tabba Tabba is in one of the better locations. It is completely surrounded by the source granites, and it's at the confluence of 2 major shears. So it's a very, very prospective location. So then in summary, we've got a significant land position in what is arguably Australia's #1 lithium province. The province currently produces 20% of global lithium supply. We've got massive exploration upside at Tabba Tabba. The 3.2 kilometres of outcropping pegmatites are comparable in size and scale to the Wodgina project. It's on mining leases, so there's an opportunity to develop the project very, very rapidly. We've got 2 rigs drilling on site and a 3rd rig coming at the end of the month. We've got 2,000 holes approved to drill into the future. It's been cleared for heritage, and the regional tenure has got excellent potential. And that's all, so thank you very much.
Now, for a first timer here, well done, that was impressive. Can you give him a warm round of applause, a big round of applause?
Thank you.
Is the brother-in-law shorter than you?
He is shorter than me.
Good, serves
yeah.
you right.
Most people are. Yeah.
Fabulous, that's good. It was really, and 1,200% is quite big. I thought you'd be smiling more all the way through the presentation, just saying.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm pretty happy. It's very exciting.
On the inside, good. Well, look, we can go and have a chat with you after drinks afterwards. Now,
thank you.
That's right, thank you. Now, I mentioned the phone and then my phone went off. Fantastic. The reason my phone went off was because I was telling one of our friends here who's just got hearing aids like me how you can remove it from Bluetooth, etc. And then I forgot to put mine back on. But for those of you who do have a phone here, you need to remember to put it on silent. Okay, so go like that, up, and then put it on silent. I will come into that. Otherwise, I will come and I will smack your bottoms, Eddie. Include you, Eddie from Argonaut. I need a bit of, no, don't put your phone on. I'm a mother of 4 children, believe me. You know all that woke stuff where you have to be nice and tell them nice things? Well, I need to get a bit of aggression out. So no phones, that's the answer. All right, have I amused you enough now for 2 seconds? We're going to be serious again. Oh, before I do that though, Joe Lowry has been resuscitated, and he will be in here to have a chat on the panel, so he's okay. And he'll be joined by Harry, so we've got a panel session at the end. I want to take you back to May. On May, we were on the road for RIU. We were in Sydney. It's Godolphin Resources, so they are a rare earth, copper and gold explorer. They're based in Lachlan Fold, central New South Wales in the Lachlan Fold Belt. And they were talking at RIU about their maiden resource that had just been released, and they were very, very happy. This is Jeneta Owens. She and her team was super happy there. You can still see now that she's still smiling. And there was a reason for that, because they had more good news last week. Let's hear about it and the opportunity. Please make her very welcome.
Thank you, Chrissy. So last week in Perth, we did talk about this exciting news, and then throughout my presentation, I forgot to mention what the exciting news was. So, so we'll try and rectify that today. That's just our statement. You can read this on our website. So investment highlights. Godolphin Resources is an exploration company. We are based centrally in the Lachlan Fold Belt in New South Wales. We do put forward a multi-discovery strategy, so that is working on more than one commodity at the one time. So we do focus on our copper and gold exploration alongside of our rare earth project as well. We, as a junior explorer, are quite unique in the fact that we have 519 kilo ounces of gold in our inventory, and that's under MREs, which is you know, pretty important. And we have a team based in Orange that are local area experts, and we can actively work on all of our exploration projects at the one time, and we have plans across our exploration suite. So the corporate snapshot, you can see there we've just completed a raise recently, and we have a little bit of money in the bank. That 1.24 there is actually not reflective. We've now got the 2.14 after that raise. And what's actually happened out of that is a company, another ASX listed company, American Rare Earths, has been able to identify our project, our rare earth project, as something that they see as high value, and have become our #1 shareholder. So that's pretty exciting news. And that was the exciting news I forgot to tell the audience in Perth. So there you go. You know, it's really great to have another company that's working in the same space of what you are, to provide that confidence in your projects by giving you money to continue to explore them. So that's rather important to us. You can see our other shareholders there, and our board of directors, who one is sitting in the audience here tonight or today. So we do have a dominant footprint in the Lachlan Fold Belt. Now, this is an area that's known for mining. We have large mines such as Cadia, North Parks, Tomingli Gold Mine, and recent discoveries by Ekins such as Boda. So it's really well known for copper and gold, large copper and gold mines. And we've been successfully exploring here for the last few years. We've had some really good hits on our copper projects specifically. Most recently, we have drilled some diamond holes at Goodrich, which is a copper project, and those cores are at the lab at the moment, and we are expecting assay results from that in the next month or so. We did observe visual mineralisation in the cores, so we're pretty excited to see what those assay results come back as. Now, we also have the rare earth side of the business, which is highlighted in green, down near Temora. And Temora is an old gold mining district, and also, you know, familiar with mining. They've had the Gidjinbun gold mine and Lake Cow, the large gold mine from Evolution, is quite nearby as well. This slide is really just showing you we've made significant progress over the last 18 months. So when we did take on the rare earth project, it had a really old JORC compliant 2004 resource, and what they had done was taken a hard rock model for rare earths and applied it to what we could see was only, you know, they'd only drilled the clays, and potentially not that successfully. So when we actually looked at it and did our due diligence, we thought we could add a lot of value to that. So in that period of time, we've taken that project, we've done a diamond drilling program, we've done some initial metallurgy, and we've put together the resource, and we put that out in April this year. Now, you know, those results have been fantastic, but alongside of that, we have actually been working on our copper and gold projects, as I mentioned. Copper is, you know, going to be in demand as well, and we really see a lot of value in that side of the business. So looking back to the rare earths, and, you know, there's been a lot of probably talk about these things in lithium today, and what are they used for? What are the future uses for these products? And, you know, we all do know that most of, you know, China controls most of the distribution of these particular metals, and there's an appetite from other countries around the world to source these products from elsewhere. So you can see there, the main use for rare earths is in permanent magnets, and they're used in all sorts of equipment. EV batteries is one of them, but any GPS-enabled device uses rare earths in those, the permanent magnets in those devices, and it's enabled technology to become smaller. So because it's lightweight and they do handle really high temperatures, high melting points, they really are the metals for the future. So Narrabri is located near Temora, and we didn't find it. As I mentioned, there was a known resource there, and you can see here it's been highlighted by a couple of different government department publications in Australia to say that it is a source of rare earth elements. Some pictures there of the project area, and you can see our drill rig when we were drilling there last year, and the overall site. The site is used for cropping, so wheat and sheep grazing. It's not high productive fertile ground, so it is on those margins of the farming areas. But importantly, it's close to infrastructure, it's close to communities, and we have national highways and rails within 5 kilometres of the project site. From an infrastructure perspective, it really doesn't get much better than that. What we did was the 31 diamond drill holes into this project area, and that enabled us to, we twinned some of the historic holes, which gave confidence to the resource geologists to include the historic drilling into that, and we've been able to update our resource using all of that data. So our maiden resource that we put out earlier this year, you can see there at 94.9 million tonnes at 739 ppm TREO. So that's total rare earth oxides plus yttrium. And you can see that we found that higher grade core of 20 million tonnes at over 1,000 ppm TREO, which was important because that does give us a kick-off for mining into the future and I guess a focus for our upcoming mining studies. So what that did represent was 126% uplift in the TREO grade from that old resource. We now have indicated, which means that we can move forward into that mining study phase. And we've got that 30% increase in tonnage. And this is just from our first round of drilling, like the first drill holes we've drilled there. So that's pretty exceptional. And obviously our further drilling campaigns will increase that size, grade, tonnage, all of those things. What was also really encouraging is the bottom line there of the initial metallurgy. We sent a few samples off and we got mixed results. We didn't have all the information on the cores when we sent the samples off, but we wanted to know simple things like, does it leach or not, which is really important in these clay-hosted deposits. And you can see there we got over 90% recovery of those key magnet minerals. Now that's actually quite outstanding. Most of the industry gets between maybe 40 to 60%. So that does really stand out as something unique about this project. And that's what we're going to be working on in the next few months, is to investigate that more. Now again, something that does make Narrabri different from the regular or other clay-hosted rare earths is that we have multiple layers of rare earths. So generally they're one thin layer, and we actually have multiple layers in the one location, which means that we have more rare earths in a thicker profile, but a smaller footprint on the surface, which is actually quite good. We also, I mentioned that we were able to get historic data in our MRE. The reason why we couldn't do our own drilling there at the time was because it was underwater, because the Eastern Australia last year was very, very wet. And now we can actually go back and drill into those areas. And you see the orange circle there that's highlighting that blue zone. Well, that's a lower grade zone. And the reason that that's lower grade is because it hasn't actually penetrated all of those 3 layers. So we actually can go back now that it's dried out, drill a couple of diamond holes into there and really increase that grade and tonnage in quite a cheap and effective way. We also know that you can see potentially from this image that there's a natural progression to the northeast. So when we do extension drilling, that's the area that we will focus into. So slightly to the north, sorry, I said northeast, but I meant northwest. It's like left and right. And that's going to be our focus area for the next round of drilling. Now, importantly, we have recently picked up another tenement that actually abuts this tenement to the west, and there's an extra 112 square kilometres of ground that is in this area that is located to in the direction of what we see the mineralisation going, so that extension direction, and that provides a lot of exploration potential. And when we get to development stages, we also have ground where we can put additional mining infrastructure. So this is the tenement I was actually talking about. You can see there the Narrabri, where it has the resource there, where those little crosses are, and then we've got that large tenement off to the west and in that extension direction. This tenement is really it was very good pickup. When we did the due diligence, we found that it actually hosts another granite an A-type granite of the Narrabri Suite, which is where the rare earths come from in the Narrabri deposit, and they've never been tested for rare earths. So there's a whole bunch of upside. There's also the fact that there's an old a tin mine in the northern part of this district that, again, you know, the old timers worked it, but it's never been followed up with modern exploration. So we're really very happy about getting this tenement granted and look forward to exploring it. So what are we going to be looking at over the next 6 months? So at the moment, we've had some work done on our Narrabri cores by the Geological Survey of New South Wales. They've high-logged the entire 31 drill holes that we drilled, and we have received some preliminary results, and we're just working through to understand what that means. We're going to be then putting that data set together with our drilling data and try and define, see whether we can see vectors, I guess, for the extension. We are going to do some diamond drilling at Narrabri. We're also sending more samples off for that metallurgical test work, as I mentioned. So that's really important to ensure that we can understand the entire deposit. So we're stretching out and getting those samples from across the deposit area. We will also be working on our copper and gold projects in this period of time. So I mentioned we have done some diamond drilling at Goodrich, but moving on from that, we're actually drilling 2 other prospects at Yeovil, and that includes Cyclops, which we received government funding to assist us with the drilling costs, and also Yeovil East. And over this next period of 6 months, we will have lots of market updates on those particular projects. So just a little bit more in-depth information about Yeovil. So Yeovil is located around about 100 kilometres to the northwest of Orange in New South Wales. We do have a mineral resource estimate over the Yeovil deposit itself. It has, again, we're looking at 12.8 million tonnes, and you can see the grades there, but if you can do a gold equivalent, which a lot of people do to compare it to other projects, we're looking at about a 0.8 gold equivalent number, which is quite good. It actually is better grades than the Boda discovery, which is close by, and a lot of people know of that particular project. Yeovil itself is quite unique. It has about 20 kilometres strike length, thanks Chrissy, of known copper mineralisation. So that's known occurrences that people have, or previous explorers and old timers have found. And we're going to target in on 3 of those areas. So Goodrich to the south, which we mentioned that we have drilled, and we've got Yeovil east and Cyclops to the north. Now this would just show you the drill core that we actually got from Cyclops last year. So we did drill 1 hole into this area, and that's super high grade chalcopyrite, so copper minerals and magnetite. Since that time, we've done surface magnetic surveys, which has helped us to define our drilling that's coming up. So we're really targeting those high grade zones of magnetite and chalcopyrite to try and find where it's blown out and get a nice big chunk of copper that we can potentially take to mining soon. So the investment summary, obviously we've got our wonderful rare earth project that we're just in the beginnings of bringing, to full fruition. It's what we've done to date with 1 round of drilling has been quite exceptional. We've got exceptional grades, we've got exceptional recoveries, and we've got a lot more work to do on that front. Now, aside from that is our copper ready or copper targets and the rest of our wonderful portfolio in the Lachlan Fold Belt. Thanks, Chrissy.
Thanks, Jeneta. I didn't really whip you that bit. You did have your minute left, my apologies. Well whipped up though, that was very well done. Next up, Paul Locke, Managing Director and Founder of Pan Asia Metals. Now, Pan Asia has entered into 2 MOUs, one in Vietnam with VMS, who is the sister company of VinFast, worth $105 billion. Not bad. And another one is IRPC. They're in Thailand. They're a parent company of PTT, and they're worth $45 billion. So just little companies. They must actually, they must really, really like him. So should we be like him as much as they do? Would you please welcome Paul Locke and Pan Asia Metals?
Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks for all staying back this late. I hate this session because when everyone walks out, it's really bad. Excellent. Okay, so I'm the Managing Director of Pan Asia Metals, and we're originally a Southeast Asian focused exploration company, but we're moving into feasibility and development, and we've got some really great things happening. So just briefly, we have two projects. Our first project area is in Southeast Asia, and it's our pathway to early cash flow. And then second is what we're doing in Chile. It's new, and it's our pathway to future growth. So our focus is Southeast Asia, but we're also setting ourselves up for future growth as our projects develop. So EV, is it real? Just briefly, I love this chart. I want an EV, I've got an EV. I think all of you should get one, because only 80% or 20% of the energy of an ICE vehicle gets through to the wheels, whereas in an EV, it's 67%, and then you get regeneration. So they're fantastic, and the litmus test is there's a lot of EV taxis in Asia. If you can make it work in Asia, you can make it work anywhere. So there's a lot of momentum in this market. We're passing the point where mass consumers start taking on EVs, and we're seeing that in Australia. We're seeing a lot of BYDs here, cheaper than a Camry, or the same price as a Camry, but much more efficient. So this thing's here for a while. But the next question is, where will all the EVs be made? Now, we always talk about Europe and the US and the IRA, but the reality is over 55% of ICE vehicles are made in Asia. That's India, China, and Southeast Asia. And this is not going to change, because in Asia, manufacturing and processing is what their business is about, and there's a lot of policy work going on to retain this growth. Nearly 90% of 2- and 3-wheelers are also made in Asia. So Pan Asia Metals is really focused on developing its business in Asia. What we're seeing too is that as EV production ramps up, we're seeing a lot of movement of EV producers into Southeast Asia, from China, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. So EV and battery manufacturers. And they're focusing on Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And Thailand, well, it's a really busy region. I'll get to Thailand in a sec. But we've got all the brand names there, and some you don't know, and many more that we've never heard of here. But it's a really busy place. And where are we? We're right in the thick of it. So we've got the Wildcat lithium project in Thailand, southern Thailand, 40 minutes out of Phuket. So if you want to come along, you can go for a swim. And with that project, we have an MOU with a group called IRPC, which Chrissy mentioned. And in Vietnam, we've got a MOU with a group called VinES, and we're discussing the construction of a lithium conversion facility, PFS nearly finished. Thailand is the largest auto producer in Southeast Asia, 4th largest in Asia, and Thailand wants to retain this position. So there's a big focus on policy. In fact, the policy focus is so intense that they've also introduced a mining policy to encourage exploration and development of critical metal projects. So that sets up PAM really well. You'll see here that the Mercedes EQS EV, if you see it on Melbourne's roads, is actually manufactured in Thailand, as is most of the Japanese and Korean ICE vehicles. And the Chinese are moving in. BYD is building a factory there. GWM from China is going to make Thailand its ASEAN headquarters. And then I've got Hoson. Hoson is one of a raft of many Chinese smaller EV producers looking to build and are building in Thailand. So a bit on the projects. So just to remind you, so Southeast Asia is our pathway to early cash flow. Now, the MOU for the Wildcat lithium project is with IRPC. IRPC is a $1.2 billion US dollar company, or 2.4 billion Aussie dollar company, but its 45% shareholder is PTT, which is Aussie 43 billion, and PTT has entered into joint ventures with CATL, Gauci, and Foxconn to build or manufacture batteries and build EVs. So Pan Asia Metals is keeping really good company here, because IRPC is effectively PTT's subsidiary. They've transferred the geology team over and so on. And the idea is that we're going to build a mine and produce concentrate. We're going to process that concentrate in JV with IRPC to produce lithium chemicals, carbonate or hydroxide, and then where our stretch target is cathode active material. This is IRPC's, one of their industrial farms, just down in Rayong, and our team was visiting there earlier this month to look for a site for a conversion facility. And then VinES in Vietnam, this is a joint venture to produce or build a standalone lithium conversion facility to produce lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. The stretch target again is cathode active material. We're in discussion, so our PFS is nearly complete, and then the idea is to move into a definitive agreement and look at the financials of building, or the metrics of building such a facility. And again, VinES is a full-scale battery producer, produces batteries for handhelds, stationary storage, and also EVs. Its sister company VinFast and others. And VinES has a joint venture with Gauci to produce LFP batteries. So onto the projects. Our Wildcat lithium project in southern Thailand has two prospects. RK Lee prospect to the south has a 10.4 million tonne lepidolite style resource grading 0.44% Li2O. Don't let the grades worry you at this point, we'll get to that. And BT lithium prospect to the north has a 16 to 25 million tonne Li2O tonne exploration target grading 0.4 to 0.7 Li2O, which is drill supported. So if it all goes well, we expect to have somewhere between 30 and 40 million tonnes of resource to mine. You can see here that we're on the highway. There's a lot of roads and wires there, so we're well connected. And there's a hydro dam on the network. So we're on our way to producing a clean green product. Just a cross section here, you can see the dark dashes there. They're the lepidolite pegmatite intersections. And even though the grade is 0.44%, many of those intersections grade over 1%. And on average grade anywhere from say 0.5 up to 0.8%. So the actual pegmatites are a lot richer than 0.44%. And as a result, we're going backwards here, but as a result, we're doing ore sorting, and or this allows us to do ore sorting, where in this case we upgraded the feed grade from a 0.5% input to 0.92% Li2 output. So our resource grade of 0.44% doesn't reflect really what we're looking at here. We expect our feed grades to be around the 0.85%, 0.8 to 0.9%, but what makes this work is the metallurgy and cost environment. And that's really important. It's not about grade and tonnes, it's about grade, metallurgy and cost environment. And here we're producing a 3.6% mica con, and we're getting recoveries up to 87% Li2O, and we expect to do better. So they're pretty good recoveries. And then for lithium into solution, we're getting recoveries up to 88% Li, and we expect that to increase. So when we put our cost environment over top of this, we've got a project which is possibly going to be quite low on the cost curve, and that's our aim. The process we're using is a sulfate roast. It's really simple. The Chinese have been using it. There's no new tech here. It's well practiced, and there's no IP attached to it. So we expect to be kicking some goals on this. And what that means is we expect to be somewhere on the cost curve similar to the Chinese lepidolite processes, which are the green bars here. You can see Yongxin, one of the leading Chinese producers, and they're producing LCE at under $6,000 a tonne. That doesn't seem right for a product which grades 0.44%, but when you add your mets in, your byproducts, your cost environment, then you're starting to get something that's cheap to produce, and it's battery grade. Now moving on a bit here to Chile. So here, this is our pathway to future growth. So we're starting to think about, 2, 3, 4 years down the track, and where we go once our Southeast Asian assets are up and running. Now, Rick Rule said, pounce when no one is watching. And back in April, you might remember, everyone was screaming that Chile was going to nationalise everything, and it was the end of the world, and no one wants to go to Chile. Well, we walked in there and picked up 1,600 square kilometres of prime brine and clay, lithium brine, lithium clay ground for a pretty low price. And that's set us up. So this is in the north of Chile. It's at 800 to 1100 metres. It's 7 prospects, which are prospective for Lee brines. Some are Lee brines of Lee clays and Lee clays. And you can see here, this is a mining district. They've been mining nitrates for 100 years up there. Good infrastructure, good power, but not really any people. But our key project, 78 k's from Iquique, which is a port, 200,000 people, deep water port, and we're on the main road, main North American north-south highway, which power lines are running through it. So it's actually one of the most strategically placed lithium projects in South America because of our elevation and proximity to port. Atacama is at 2,300 metres, many of our peers at 3,500 to 4,500 metres in the Andes. This is the pink prospect. Those pink dots are anywhere from 650 ppm Lee to 2,200 ppm Lee, which is pretty extraordinary for surface samples. Anomalous is 250 Lee. There's a lot of 250s in there, but we're looking forward to kicking some goals at this project. And this is Hilux. This is a lithium clay project. It's been drilled. Those holes there average 16.6 metres of Lee intersections, averaging 1,000 ppm. In the world of clays, that's pretty good. And then when you bring into it our cost environment and proximity to infrastructure, they are very good. Now, it's not just about mining. We've got to look after our communities. So we do have a very sophisticated ESG plan, particularly in Thailand, where we focus on education, we focus on healthcare, and we focus on sports. And we've brought the community in. They want us there, and they can see the opportunity with a mining operation. So I ask you, why would you want to explore a better future with us? Well, one, we are the one and only lithium exploration company in Southeast Asia with licensed properties and a JORC resource and MOUs with partners which have got strong balance sheets and a pathway to lithium chemicals. Two, we have two opportunities. We've got Southeast Asia, which is going to deliver us an early cash flow, and we've got Chile, which is going to deliver us our future growth. Three, we're not just looking at sales, at mine gate sales. We're looking at going past the mine gate to produce Lee chemicals, and our stretch target is cathode active materials, which we think we can get there. And four, management and the board owns a big chunk of the company. So if we make a wrong decision, I noticed our share price was down today. Thank you to those people who sold, but it hurts us more than it hurts you. So explore a better future with us, and remember, it doesn't take much to be a nice person. Thank you.
You can tell I like that presentation, can't you? I like it. Good people doing good things. All right. Where's the cheeky one? Scott Williamson. There he is. You wouldn't have a slide like that at the end, would you? No, that's not true. He's actually a really lovely human being as well. This is Scotty Williamson. He is the MD of Blackstone Minerals. They're an Australian-based battery materials developer focusing on building an integrated mining and refining business in Vietnam. Much more I could say, but I know he loves to talk for longer than I do. So let's make him welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks to Vertical Events. Great to be back in Melbourne. So you can see here, we've got a previously operating nickel mine. It's located in the north of Vietnam, and it operated between 2013 and 2016. It went into care and maintenance when the nickel price was about $8,000 a tonne. It is now sitting comfortably around $20,000 a tonne, and it's looking very good, particularly because of the demand that's coming from the electric vehicle. So we're looking to restart this mine, and we're also looking to build a refinery that will produce the chemical products for the lithium-ion battery. So we see Vietnam as a bit of a hub for the downstream processing of our nickel, and we're looking to bring in imported nickel feedstocks from places like Australia and Canada. We've taken some strategic investments in other nickel developers. There's two in the Manitoba region. We've got stakes in Flying Nickel and Corazon. Corazon is listed on the ASX and Flying Nickel is on the TSX. We like Manitoba because it has abundant renewable hydroelectric power, as we also do in Vietnam as well. So we like green nickel and we like low carbon and low CO2 footprint nickel because our competitors in Indonesia certainly do not have clean nickel. We also have an investment in Nico, which is in Western Australia. That's a large nickel laterite. So the idea is 50% of our feed for our refinery will come from imported feedstocks from around the world, and 50% will come from our nickel mine, which we're looking to restart. You can see here, well positioned. It's interesting. So today we're trading around 12 cents. Our last capital raising 2 years ago, we raised $60 million at 58 cents. We introduced some of the biggest institutions in the world, groups like BlackRock and Fidelity. So if you want to get in at a much lower level than those groups, it's some good buying opportunity. So we have a very supportive institutional shareholder base, and these are groups that can write $50 to $100 million tickets. Unfortunately, the current market cap is not allowing them to do that. But obviously, as we de-risk this project, the idea is that they will be there for the last final investment decision. So a strong board and management team. We've introduced recently Dan Locker. He has over 10 years as the Managing Director of Western Areas, which was taken over by IGO recently. So Dan has operated nickel mines for decades, and so he brings some mining engineering capabilities. I also have a background in mining engineering. Hamish and Frank are geologists, and Alison Gaines is a corporate governance expert. So we've got some support from the sell side also as well, so we appreciate all the analysts' coverage. So you can see here we're located in the northern Vietnam region. We're looking to restart the mine and build a refinery. The mine is going to be a large-scale open pit. There's around 500,000 tonnes of nickel in resource. So this is a large nickel sulfide district. Low strip ratio open pit mining. The downstream is where it gets really exciting and interesting. The downstream is where we're producing precursor cathode active material and a high nickel cathode precursor product. We're looking at a product that has nickel, cobalt and manganese in a ratio of 8:1:1. So we've completed a full pilot plant on that refinery, and we're at the final stages of a definitive feasibility study. So you can see here, this is the business structure. The refinery is where we're looking to bring in partners from the downstream. So we're looking at bringing in lithium-ion battery players, including cathode or lithium-ion battery or electric vehicle manufacturers into that partnership process. We've got in the order of 20 or 30 groups in the data room now looking at becoming our partner in this refinery, and it's because we're producing those downstream products. So looking to bring in third-party feed from other nickel developers, other nickel mining companies, and also nickel trading groups like Trafigura we have a LOI with. So you can see the interest will be brought in from our strategic partners, and then majority of the feedstock will come from our Tarkwar nickel project. As Harry said, recently in the last session, or at the start of this session, 50% of global demand for batteries will contain high nickel NCM cathodes by 2028. And this is the most important part of our story, is the fact that we will produce green nickel. As you can see, we've actually trademarked the term, so anyone who uses that needs to be careful. Green nickel for us is all about low carbon. It's about electrification of fleet. It's about this circular economy, and really just highest level ESG compliance. And as I said, that's just, unfortunately, that's not what's happening in Indonesia. And we're hoping that the world can see that the future of nickel, clean green nickel, is very much aligned with what we're trying to achieve in Vietnam. And the benefit of Vietnam is we've got a low-cost operating environment. We've got abundant hydroelectric power, which is driving a lowest quartile cash costs. So you can see we'll sit in the first quartile. We think we can be very cost competitive compared to our peers in Indonesia. And so, yeah, the benefit of focusing on highest level ESG compliance is actually also have low operating costs as well. So we've done an independent analysis, so it's called a life cycle analysis of our greenhouse gas emissions. We've used a group called Minviro, and this has also been independently verified by the Nickel Institute. So you can see there, we are significantly lower than our peers in Indonesia. So the Indonesian HPAL are looking at twice the carbon footprint. The Indonesia RKEF nickel pig iron to matte process is 6 times the CO2 footprint. So that nickel, unfortunately, is just not going to reach all the way into a Mercedes or a BMW. These brands will not tarnish their reputation by going anywhere near that dirty nickel in Indonesia. So we are seeing a real push from the European car manufacturers to threshold limits on CO2 footprint of the nickel. So they're actually starting to put limits on CO2, and this is becoming a very important part of the nickel industry, is understanding what is your CO2 footprint of your nickel, because if it's too high, it's just not going to cut it for the premium brands in Europe. You can see we've got a pathway to net zero. We don't want to stop at being the lowest CO2 footprint in the world. We actually want to go all the way to net zero. So why not go all the way to net zero? And we've got a pathway to achieving that, and we'd like to achieve that from day one. So this is our region. We've got a number of different deposits. They are nickel sulfides, the very large-scale disseminated ore bodies. We've also got small-scale, massive sulfide underground mines. The undergrounds are sort of narrow underground mining, similar to what you would see in Cobalt. Very similar to like a Mount Keith style. Mount Keith is one of Western Australia's most prolific nickel sulfide mines owned by BHP. So we've got what I would call as a mini Mount Keith, surrounded by some little Cobalt style underground massive sulfides. So that's the mini Mount Keith there, and that's got about 10 years of mine life. It'll produce around 18,000 tonnes per annum nickel, so that's 50% of the feedstock for the refinery. So the refinery scale is around over 40,000 tonnes per annum from the refinery. So this is a world-class scale nickel refinery, and the nickel mine that we have in Vietnam will feed 50% of that feedstock. So this is what we're going to achieve. So the concentrated, very standard crush grind flotation circuit, then you produce concentrate. Concentrate will then go through a pressure oxidation process. So this is a tried and tested technology used all through the mining industry since the 1960s. The second technology is solvent extraction. So there's nothing novel about this flow sheet. This is all tried and tested off-the-shelf technology. So the first product we'll produce is a copper cathode. So that's a byproduct of this process. Another byproduct is Epsom salts, which is magnesium sulfate. But the real important products we're trying to produce are nickel sulfate and cobalt sulfate. We can crystallize and sell those as products, or we keep them in solution and we combine them with manganese sulfate to produce that NCM 811 product. That product trades at a significant premium to the underlying metal prices. It can trade as much as 20 to 40% premium to the underlying nickel, cobalt and manganese prices. One of the benefits of this flow sheet is it's very flexible on feedstock. So nickel concentrate is our preferred feedstock, but we can also feed mixed hydroxide precipitate, nickel matte and black mass. So we're very flexible on feedstock. Black mass is the recyclable product from the lithium-ion battery. One of the benefits also is that we can take nickel concentrates that are potentially not suitable for the stainless steel smelting industry. So a high arsenic or a high MgO concentrate that's not suitable for smelting can be suitable for our refinery. So we can arbitrage the different payabilities on these different products as well. So at the moment, MHP has a low payability, but previously that was as high as 90 to 100%. At the moment, it's low as 65 to 70%. So at the moment, we potentially look at bringing in some MHP as long as the CO2 footprint meets our threshold limits. So we've got flexibility, and it's really important in what is, as Harry said, a very complex industry at the moment, because there's so many different ways that you can get nickel into a battery, but it's important that you do it with a low CO2 footprint. So we acquired the mine around 4 years ago. We've done over 100,000 metres of drilling. We've taken it from scoping study, and we're now in the final stages of a definitive feasibility study. So that's about how long it takes to move through that study phase. I'd say, and we've talked a lot about the Lassonde curve at the moment, we're at the very bottom of the first wave, and we're about to start the second wave. And so it's all about, for us, is finding the funding partners, finding the technology partners, the downstream players that are going to come into this partnership and help us build this refinery. Just quickly, we've recently been approached by a rare earth refinery. So one of the only rare earth refineries outside of China and Lynas has been operating in Vietnam for over 10 years. They actually produce rare earth oxides, the same products that Lynas produce. They approached us and said, we want to go mining in the north of Vietnam, up near where your nickel project is, and we said, well, we'd love to help you. So we're looking at a joint venture with the local Vietnam refinery to go and access some of the best rare earth deposits in the world. These are world-class deposits. Joe Biden's actually in Hanoi at the moment and has signed an MOU between the US and Vietnam government around rare earths, and these assets are very strategic and very political. So we're very excited to be at the forefront of this opportunity, and we're really excited to see what this opportunity plays out. But it's looking like we've got some of the best rare earth deposits in the world, and because we're on the ground in Vietnam, we will have access to that with our partners. So in summary, we have a vertically integrated mining and refining business. We have abundant hydroelectric power, a globally relevant nickel sulfide district, first quartile cost position, but most importantly, with the lowest carbon footprint nickel in the industry. It's a partnership-based model. We will bring in a large player who will help us with the large CapEx requirement. And we've also got an opportunity that's playing out as well. So yeah, plenty to look forward to over the coming months. And as I said, a very low share price compared to guys like BlackRock and Fidelity. So get in now while it's cheap. Thank you.
Well done, Blackstone. We're so glad you were in the room at the end of today for that presentation and the next one as well, because we were all a little bit excited this morning because there was an announcement made and we looked at it and we thought, oh, this will be interesting. You have to do a bit of ducking and diving and changing your presentation. It was pretty good last week, but this week it's going to be even more special. So this is International Graphite. The announcement that they made this morning regarded their, can I say this? All right, so they've made a new mineral resource estimate which increases the size of their graphite deposit by 3.4 times. So it's pretty sizable, isn't it? And that makes their Springfield graphite project, which is over in WA, the nation's second biggest graphite project, and that is pretty exciting. A pretty exciting adjunct to the downstream processing facility they're lining up down Collie Way. So the man to tell us all about it is this fellow here, Andrew, I've just had a mental blank and forgot your last name, Andrew Worland, who is the CEO. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone?
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for hanging around to hear about graphite in the last presentation of the day. Thanks for everyone for putting on this wonderful forum. Yes, as Chrissy alluded to, a fantastic announcement today, probably our most important announcement in the 18 months of our corporate history since we've been listed on the ASX. Our vision at International Graphite is to put together a mine-to-market supply of battery anode materials from our mine at the Springdale Graphite Project in the south of Western Australia via Collie, where we intend on doing downstream processing. So what we announced this morning, the breaking news, new mineral resource out for Springdale. It's now confirmed as the second largest deposit in Australia and probably the 12th in the world, going on JORC compliant reporting. A 3.4 to 3.5 times increase to 49.3 million tonnes at 6.5% TGC. Within that, there's 18 million tonnes that's in the oxide and transitional material. I'll explain the significance of that later. We had 28 million tonnes at 8.7%, so a higher grade cut applied to the property would give us a higher grade mineral resource as well. 27% of that resource is classified as indicated. That's critical for mine planning, optimisations, and for us being able to do economic projections into the future. Just to put it in context for you, what does a 4.3 million tonne resource in graphite mean? Well, the majority of producers out there in the world today with graphite produce around 20 to 200,000 tonnes of graphite in concentrate. We're aiming to produce about 40,000 to 50,000 tonnes in con. That 49 million tonnes at 6.5% translates to 3.2 million tonnes of contained graphite. Now, I'm not saying for a second that you mine every single tonne that's in that resource, but what I am saying is if you produce 40 to 50,000 tonnes of it, that resource would be sufficient for 60 to 70, perhaps 80 years of operations. So we've got a huge resource here at Springdale. The other important takeaway of this resource I want all you guys to take away with you is that it's a fines deposit. Graphite's is historically been an industry that's supplied industrial products in coarse and jumbo flakes. You'd have heard that dating back to probably 2007, 2008, when graphite developers were starting to promote their projects. Our project isn't going to that market. We're a pure play on the lithium-ion battery. You've heard the lithium story all day. Graphite's a critical component to the lithium-ion battery. Just quickly, the lithium-ion battery market, you've, again, as I said, heard about lithium batteries all day today. The critical piece on this slide, 45 million electric vehicles are expected to be produced in 2030, according to the International Energy Association. Why is that important? Because in every motor vehicle, in every lithium-ion battery is an anode, and 95% of the anode is graphite. There's up to 10 times more graphite in a lithium-ion battery than lithium. And the important stat relative to that 45 million vehicles that will be produced in 2030 is that 1 kilogram of graphite is required for every kilowatt hour of capacity in a lithium-ion battery. So if you're producing a motor vehicle that has a 50 to 75 kilowatt requirement, then you're going to need 50 to 75 kilograms of graphite. Multiply that by 45 million tonnes, and you soon get a demand side equation for graphite that's significantly above where it is today, which is somewhere around 1.5 million tonnes of supply per annum. So this is a huge opportunity for graphite producers, and it's a huge opportunity for Western Australia because our assets are fully integrated in Western Australia, and it's be at the forefront for battery development in North America, Europe and Asia going into the future. The Springdale Graphite Project is located in the southwest of Western Australia, or the great southern area of Western Australia, I should say. About 25 kilometres south of Ravensthorpe. You'd be familiar with the Ravensthorpe nickel mine, I'm sure, owned by First Quantum, Canada's First Quantum, and the Mount Cat lithium mine, which is again just next to Ravensthorpe. It's an area that is used to cohabitation of agriculture and mining. So this is the resource between indicated and inferred, and it shows the change in the resource since we acquired the project back in 2022, and was the basis for our listing. We started drilling at 13.5 million tonnes, beg your pardon, 15.6 million tonnes at 6%. We've had an increase in indicated resource from 0 to 13.5 million tonnes at 7.5%, and we've had an increase in inferred material from 15.6 million tonnes to 41.8 million tonnes at 6.1%. Overall, 49 million tonnes of graphite, and we've had roughly a 250% increase in the tonnes, and contained metals increased by 240%. That's a typo, should be 240% in that far right column. So we are the second biggest deposit now in Australia. We're 100% owned. 27% of our material is at the indicated level. We completed, there's a total of 30,000 metres of drilling in this deposit, and we completed 20,000 metres of that drilling in 2022 and 2023. We made 4 new discoveries on those properties. Mason Bay, Central, South and Far West were the deposits that we that we discovered during that drilling program. And Mason Bay has jorked up into its own deposit. And what's significant about this particular slide is the level of untested graphite anomalies that exist throughout our tenement base. And so we believe we've tested somewhere in the vicinity of 20% of those anomalies, which accounts for 10% of our tenement area. So this resource is going to grow substantially over the course of the next 12 to 18 months as we seek to do further drilling to support further studies. This is a cross-section of the Mason Bay and Central deposits. The purpose of this slide is to show you that it is shallow mineralisation. Now, in this mineral resource estimate, 18 million tonnes was in the oxidised and transitional areas of the mine. So the oxidised area is the first 25 metres. So 9 million tonnes was in the first 25 metres. So we're going to have a very shallow open pit mining operation here that's going to have a very, very attractive operating cost when we finish off our full feasibility studies. And this is what the processing facility will look like. A very simple single product flotation circuit with a crush, grind and flotation concentrator, producing 40 to 50,000 tonne of graphite in concentrate per annum. As I said before, it's got some great operating advantages. It's on cleared agricultural land, have shallow open pits. It's all in, primarily the first 10 or 15 years will be in weathered rock, low strip ratios, free dig, conventional mining, conventional processing equipment, nothing exotic in this particular project. It's a bread and butter flotation concentrator. Moving on to Collie. So the real value in the graphite space now is not in mining a concentrate, it's getting to downstream and trying to put your project into the lithium-ion battery spectrum. We've established our facilities in Collie, and we hope to capture the full value chain of graphite through the downstream processing of our graphite concentrates. So working your way through that slide, this is sort of a 101 of what downstream processing is about. The flake, the concentrate that we mined at Springdale is a fine flake. It'll be less than 150 micron. That's perfect for battery anode material. It's the lowest cost processing type of graphite flake that you would want. The first stage of that is to micronise the product. You then spherodize it and ultimately purify it and take it from a 95% graphite concentrate to 99.95%, which is your battery grade material. And at that point, you've got a marketable product, and other peers of ours in the marketplace are looking to do precisely that, produce a spherodized purified graphite. There's one step further to go to capture the full value chain of battery anode material before you're actually selling it directly to the cell manufacturers and the battery industry, and that is to coat the material. And our aim at International Graphite is to cover the full spectrum of that process flow sheet. As I said, we've established our facilities in Collie. We have, and we think we're probably the only company around the world that's established this level of R&D facility, certainly in Australia, for micronising and spherodising. And we commissioned that in 2022 and produced a sample product based on imported concentrates to assess the conditions for micronising and spherodising. We got the sizing distributions correct, and they were of market grade quality. We're now looking to increase the scale of that plant. We've just ordered additional micronising equipment out of North America. That's arrived in Fremantle, and we're looking to take it out of the box over the next week and get it down to Collie, and we start the installation and commissioning phase of that particular project in the next 4 weeks. Back in April, we released a scoping study for our battery anode facilities in Collie. Those facilities assessed receiving 40,000 tonne of concentrate. We couldn't link it to Springdale at the time because Springdale wasn't sufficiently advanced from a JORC perspective to publish forecasts. We've now obviously got an indicated resource that allows us to finish off that task and integrate Springdale into this facility. But if we were to treat 40,000 tonnes of concentrate in Collie, we would be producing, in the first instance, a uncoated spherodized purified product that I mentioned earlier as a saleable product, and then secondly into a coated product. And the capital cost estimate For the latter is $222 million, and for the former is $87 million. The key point to this is it's been run at a price deck issued by Macquarie Bank, and it generates EBITDAs of $100 million per annum at that current price forecast once in operations. It's also a flexible design. These facilities can be built in modular formations, so you can add to them and expand them to increase your production profile and manage your production and your capital cost estimate relative to the scale of the company at that particular point in time. So there's another long life asset that's going to be ready and established to accommodate the Springdale long life mining project that we have. We've secured a site in Collie for our Banff battery anode facilities. I've got a 20 hectare site next to the Blue Waters power station. Why Collie? Well, Collie is the centre of the southwest interconnected grid in Western Australia. All power is disseminated from Collie that powers Perth up to Kalbarri, south to Albany and out to Kalgoorlie. And so as Collie transitions from the historical coal mining centre of Western Australia and transitions into the renewable energy sector, those poles and wires will be the centre for pushing out that electricity across the network, and we're as close as you can possibly be to that just transmission point. The other part of Collie, of course, is it's being really well backed by state and federal governments to transition out of the old world of coal mining that it had and into a newer industry. So we've received a $2 million grant so far from the state government and a $4.7 million grant from the federal government Critical Minerals Office. We're at the moment applying for a further grant through the Collie Transition Fund. We should have some more news on that later this year. And that has certainly been of great assistance for us in keeping us out of the capital markets in the 18 months since we've been listed. Global megatrends, of course, driving graphite. You've heard all this before today about the lithium-ion battery. Just remember that important statistic, well, two statistics from earlier. 95% of the battery anode for a lithium-ion battery is made of graphite. More graphite is required than any other commodity within that lithium-ion battery, and the electric vehicle rollout campaign is sustainable and ongoing. So to highlight what we've got, graphite critical in the electrification story, huge battery deficits expected. We've got the right assets and the right team. The technology, the technical team that we have is in the graphite industry is second to none. We've got supportive governments and communities, and we'll be able to deliver something in terms of a supply chain that's got the highest ESG credentials of anybody out there in the marketplace looking to bring new graphite to the gigafactories of North America, Europe and Asia. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Well done, Andrew Worland. A great announcement to bring to us today as well. That was really, really wonderful. Right, we're doing some furniture rearranging up here because we haven't had enough to do today. So we're bringing up 3 chairs, which means I have 3 victims coming to the front. One of them I can see at the back of the room. Harry, you're pointing fingers at one another, are you? Who's doing it? You both want to go? Okay. Harry, Janie, come. I'll even give you your own microphone, Harry, so we can hear you. How's that for interesting? So we've got Harry coming to join us from Benchmark. We have got Jackson, who's going to take control. I've been retired for the next 20 minutes.